Yep.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, colleagues around the world. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Karina Gugler. I am a legal affairs specialist in the legal office in New York, UNICEF New York HQ, and I'm also a member of the New York Staff Association Green Team. And I'll be hosting this panel discussion with my lovely colleague, Karina Hernandez-Leon. Thank you very much to our esteemed panelists for joining us today, and for all our staff and colleagues around the world for tuning in. Since 2013, to celebrate UN World Environment Day, the New York Staff Association Green Team has been organizing a Green Fair, where we bring together local exhibitors to share their greening efforts with us, with UN staff, and where we can learn more about local green products and services and other interesting advocacy efforts. This year, unfortunately, since we can't hold the event on site, we've decided to go virtual. We have created an online platform, actually a web portal, where our exhibitors have posted engaging videos and other content, where our staff can go and look at it at leisure. So we will also be holding some interesting webinars throughout the month of June on a range of inspiring eco-conscious topics. So the Green Fair will go live, the portal will go live tomorrow. So please look out for your email invitations with the link, and then you can join and have access to the portal tomorrow. Now, to kick off our Green Fair this year, we have invited this esteemed group of speakers who are activists and influencers in the sustainability space, to share with us their work and their views on how COVID-19, how this pandemic can be a catalyst towards a more sustainable lifestyle. Now, we really hope this to be an interactive discussion. Please, for our audience, if you have questions to the panelists, please send them to us via the Q&A button. And Karina and I will be monitoring the questions as they come in, and we'll be posting them to the panelists. So Karina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Karina. It's a little complicated with the names, perhaps a little confusing because they're very, very close. But thank you again to our panelists. We wanted to thank everybody for taking time. We did want to take time to acknowledge that this is a difficult time in the US and New York in particular, but also around the world. There's great show of solidarity. And while we find that sustainability and environmental knowledge and climate action is an important topic, I did want to take the time in the space to thank our panelists for taking the time and energy to join us to talk about a topic that, while it's important, is definitely secondary to the movement and the protests demanding justice for Black lives against police brutality. So that's very important to me to note. I thank you for your time, and I acknowledge that this is a particular time in New York, beyond anywhere else. And as a personal commitment, just to be fully transparent, I commit to making sure that there's racial equity in future panels that I plan, because gender is always something that's at the top of my mind when I coordinate events and panels, but race falls on the wayside sometimes, and that's not okay. So I want to thank our panelists. I think it's going to be a great discussion. But I did want to mention that particular point because it's relevant, it's important, and it's current. So without further ado, I do want to mention also that we had one panelist drop out, but we have hopes, and we're sure it's going to be a very, very great discussion with these panelists riffing off of each other in their different sustainability fields. Without further ado, I want to ask our panelists to start introducing themselves, and I'll just go across my screen. Christine, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your platform, the Lower East Side Ecology Center?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and I'm excited to be here. I work with an organization called the Lower East Side Ecology Center, and we are a community-based entity foremost. We have started the organization with recycling activities, which were really, not very prominent here in the city in the late 80s. So it's been some time, at least for me, being involved in this. And we currently offer food scrap drop-off programs and composting, education about how composting can be part of anybody's lives. It's a very empowering thing to do, to recycle your organic waste, and it's a really closed loop system that I think is very exciting and scalable, whether you live in an urban setting or whether you live in a more rural area. It is important, and it gives us this connection to the natural environment. We also do e-waste collection programs. We collect old computers and try to get them either refurbished and then make them available to people to buy, or we recycle them responsibly here in the United States. And our programs are rounded off with environmental education work. Of course, whenever we do something, we educate, but we also have education work that focuses on the estuary in our neighborhood, which is the Lower East Side. And we do stewardship of green open space. They're all sort of very different, but they also somehow all tie together because each program really interacts with the other.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that overview. Belinda, may I ask you to introduce yourself, your blog, and your many activities?
Hi, everyone. My name is Belinda, and I am a public health professional and a sustainability blogger for A Healthy Blueprint. It serves as an online resource for people like me who is on the beginning stages of a low impact living journey. I want to be able to inspire people to practice zero waste or as much of a low impact living lifestyle as possible, and also hopefully inspire them to become change makers in their community to take climate action. Something that I'm doing on the side right now is supporting the Save Our Compost initiative, supporting with their social media. This past weekend, I actually teamed up with someone in Astoria Pug, to collect compost in the neighborhood and basically collect people's food scraps from that neighborhood so we can divert it from going to landfill or incineration. And professionally, I work on a youth engagement team for an advocacy organization for gender equality.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Josh?
Hi, Joshua Spodek. In my regular life, I teach and I coach leadership and entrepreneurship at NYU and to private clients. I also host the Leadership and the Environment podcast. After taking on, for the better part of a decade now, acting environmentally myself, I found there was something missing from the message out there. There's a lot of facts and figures and doom and gloom, and what I would generally at best call management, but not a lot of leadership of finding the joy and connection and community in acting on these things. And so I started this podcast in order to bring leaders, often people who have no environmental background or knowledge, and I bring them on the podcast and I walk them through a process where they share their environmental values and act on them. And the result is almost always that they enjoy it, that it creates connection, it creates community, and they want to do it more, and they want to share. You know, at the beginning, I say, what's something you could do to act on this value of yours? And they say, oh, I'll get my team to do something. And they themselves don't do it. And they think what I do doesn't matter. But once they do it, then they find that they really enjoy it. And one of my guests, I was just talking to him the other day, and he talked about how his son started doing some things that he didn't do before. And that got his father, my guest, to start doing things. And I said, your son, in influencing you, has done more than almost any world leader in actually getting someone to change their behavior. And it's grown. So I get people from business, McKinsey's 3-time global managing director. I've got a Super Bowl winner, a Nobel Prize winner, and I'm getting more and more people to use, ultimately I'm using community. So that people, when they go in and they say, should I get this coffee? It's got a plastic cup. Well, everyone else is doing it. I guess I will too. To switch to think, I know people in my community are acting, they're doing it. I'm not the first. I'm definitely not going to be the last, but I'm going to keep doing this. So that's a bit of the Leadership in the Environment podcast.
Thank you so much. I think that's so important, small actions. And then obviously as UNICEF, you know, we know children are our best teachers in many different spaces. So that's a great point to bring up, making it, yeah.
Can I refine one thing? You said small actions. And the point of watch my third TEDx talk. By saying small, it says you might not want to do it, or that what I find is meaningful. So it may be big, it may be small, but I first ask the person what they care about. And then I ask them, what can you do to act on what you care about? That way, even if it doesn't have a big effect on the world, if they like it, and they always do because it came from something that they cared about, then they'll do it more.
Awesome, great correction.
Meaningful action.
Yeah, meaningful and daily.
Meaningful to yourself.
Awesome, thank you, Joshua. Nick, Farmer Nick.
Hey everyone, my name is Nick CUTSUMPAS, also known as Farmer Nick NYC, and I am a plant coach and apartment farmer, which is, as I've been told, the most millennial job title you could ever have. And basically what I do is I empower people with the knowledge and competence that they need to sustainably create their own green spaces. And in New York, it is very difficult, right? We don't have access to outdoor space. We can't always garden in the same way someone in the suburbs of the country can. And you know, I truly believe that plants are a stepping stone towards sustainability. And it frustrates me that we have these conversations about the environment and protecting the world, yet we are so disconnected in our urban environments from the world that we are trying to protect. And, you know, it's sort of been my mission that if I can get you to care about this little plant on your desk, I can get you to care about the bigger plant that we're trying to save here. So I do everything from houseplants to gardens to landscaping and more recently flowers, which is a whole new thing, not a very sustainable industry, but always trying to work with brands to figure out the best ways that they can cut down on their waste and become more zero waste in the process. And recently, one of the projects I've been working on is called the Essential Farmers Project, which I co-founded with a green living roof company called Green Slate here in the city. And our goal is to basically empower those who've been made non-essential and activate different areas within the city environment that you could be growing. So right now we have taken over a 13,000 square foot rooftop by the Staten Island Ferry, which is previously just covered in weeds, and we have turned it into a now functioning farm. There's a lot of work left, but we've been supporting some of the local farms in the area, buying back some of their produce, some of their seedlings, and trying to create an oasis for growing here in the city. So that's what I'm working on. And if you have any questions about your own plants, happy to answer them.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I think this is a great segue into Matt with Rethink Food.
Hi, thank you for having me. Really honored and humbled to be here with this wonderful group. I run Rethink Food. I started in 2017. I'm a chef by trade, worked at a lot of really fancy restaurants, and throughout the whole process, I learned that there was a just total misunderstanding about what you could do with your excess food and the possibilities behind it. So we put in programs for, you know, the UN, Goldman Sachs, the James Beard Foundation, you know, fine dining restaurants all over the city to help them donate their food or understand that you can donate your food. I think it's a big misconception. And then during COVID, we pivoted to, you know, having basically, we have 25 restaurants in New York and about 7 outside of the city, Nashville, SF, and Chicago, that are producing food for community centers. And what we're trying to keep in the system is basically paying restaurants, even when restaurants are open, to take the extra step to process their excess food into something that's easily donatable, that can be useful for a community center in their area, and really connecting the dots and trying to, you know, bridge the gap between the nonprofit food system and the for-profit food system, because that's why we have 40% excess and 1 in 4 hungry now in New York. That's us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We're so excited to kick off this panel after these brief introductions. Again, we wanted this to be an informal discussion. We're hoping for lively Q&A from the chat. Karina and I will be moderating that from staff, but feel free to take the direction that the panel leads you in. For now, I think Karina is going to kick it off with a first question.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. So our overall panel discussion theme subject is how can COVID-19, the COVID-19 crisis, be a catalyst for sustainability and climate change action at home or at work. So I wanted to kick off the conversation with the first question, which is, what is the biggest challenge that this pandemic has brought to your sustainability work? So whoever wants to start first.
I'll start.
Great, thanks, Josh.
Before the pandemic, a big challenge that I faced was people would focus on climate change more than anything else. Some people would focus on plastic more than anything else. And whatever's right in front of them, I think this is the key issue. And for me, there's one environmental challenge, and it's our behavior that's affecting these things. And the more that so people put COVID in front of everything else and they forget about all the other things. I prefer to look at these things as one environmental situation that's brought about by our behavior. The virus has no volition of its own. It just moves around relative to what we're doing it. And the cause of it, the more that I learn about where pandemics come from, factory farming is a source of pandemics before this one. And wet markets, it seems, is another. That it seems to me that I view this as pollution. It happens to be pollution that replicates. So it's particularly dangerous. And we are doing practices that grow, as much as they produce greenhouse gases and they produce plastic and other sorts of pollution, they also, as waste, that we just think, oh, it'll go away. Well, it also produces viruses. And our focus, for me, from a leadership perspective, focusing on our behavior, our beliefs, the stories we tell ourselves, the excuses we give ourselves, that is what I think is, for me, that's what I focus on. And if we change it, it's in all of these areas, and focusing just on, oh, it's very important to make sure there are ventilators and make sure that we can take care of the here and now. But in the long term, to focus on changing our behavior in order to not get these results, to get different results.
If I can add to that, Josh, I was going to say that I think one of the biggest challenges right now is communicating the importance of environmental stewardship. When I'm using my platform to talk about small changes that people can make, someone actually reached out to me to say that, hey, your content right now isn't relevant to me in a global pandemic. And I took the opportunity to share that this is kind of a good opportunity for us to see the intersection between public health and environmental justice. We can see that the Black community and communities of color are disproportionately affected by coronavirus right now. And if you think about why that is, it's because many of these communities, more often than not, are living in densely populated, low-income housing. They're in poor neighborhoods. They have inconsistent access to healthcare. They are suffering from chronic health conditions due to living in these unhealthy environments for long periods of time. And although it might not be immediately obvious when I'm sharing things like, oh, grow your own food from your ends and stems, bring your own reusable bag, it's these small little actions that can lead to people getting inspired and wanting to do more systematic change. So I'm hoping that by starting these planting these little ideas, we can start the conversations and get people more inspired to do bigger things and get more politically engaged and get involved at the city and state levels to push for policies that will benefit the community.
I love that, Belinda. I think you hit the nail right on the head. And to further that, what you mentioned about the pandemic disproportionately affecting some of these minority communities, I look at the work that I've done with Teams for Food Justice, which, those who aren't familiar, it's a nonprofit that goes into schools in lower socioeconomic areas, one in particular in the Bronx that I visited, and they teach these students how to farm and produce their own food inside the school, and it's part of their class. So these young 14, 15, 16-year-olds are running a hydroponic farm in the Bronx. And they're teaching me how to harvest lettuce and where it's going to go to the farmer's market and how it's going to be, used in the cafeteria. And you look at the pandemic now and how schools are shut down, and these kids might not have access to the only servings of fruits and vegetables that they had throughout their week. And it's devastating. And these are the groups that were already food insecure to begin with. So to see how the school closures have affected the local farms and the communities has been really difficult. And I think, you know, for me, it's been really challenging figuring out the best way to activate in those areas, right? You know, food banks, some of these food banks aren't even accepting food donations anymore because they're overrun, and it ultimately becomes an operations and logistics problem. And I think hopefully what this pandemic will show is that just because these are nonprofits doesn't mean that we can't put the resources and the time to make them operate fully like for-profit businesses. Dan Pallotta has a really interesting TED Talk about how to operate a nonprofit with that kind of focus in mind. And I think what this will do is to start sort of invigorating some of these companies. I know Matt's company in particular is already thinking big like this about how we can create these sort of opportunities that will have a long-standing impact well beyond the pandemic in the sort of at the outset here. But aside from that, you know, my freezer is filled with compost. So if someone can please help me, otherwise I'm going to start burying it in Washington Square Park. I have to get a little illegal there, but who knows?
Same here, same here. It's overgrowing.
Yeah, I guess what is really incumbent on all of us is to advocate for these programs to be reinstated. And it's really sad to see that in this pandemic and in this budget crisis, all of a sudden, sustainability programs are slashed as one of the first steps that are convenient. And of course, also overlaid now with the police harassment and you know, all this unrest. You know, I think there is a really powerful point to be made here, and again to connect the two issues and to say that we also need to cut the budget of the police department here in New York City and get some of these resources to neighborhoods, to sustainability programs, because they can really build up communities, because a lot of these programs are also really community building programs that can help people empower themselves in their community, and it can help us get to a more healthier place. So I think that's also a really important venue to be active right now. We've been very affected by that, of course, because a bunch of our programs really depend on city funding. And as an organization, we also felt, at least in the beginning, very cut off, because all of a sudden we cannot, you know, connect with our constituency anymore on an ongoing basis, daily basis, providing, you know, these services, providing interactions, and also, you know, just providing educational content.
Yeah, great. Matt, do you wanna tell us a little bit about what's the biggest challenge been here for you and your organization?
You know, to be honest, it's actually been, I think the biggest challenge for us is you know, logistics is a constantly changing landscape, and especially as, like, you know, we're in the middle of this situation now. I look a little distracted, but we have like 800 families that are expecting food today, and our transportation partner, you know, breached the contract, and they can't get people to go out because the drivers are scared of the protesters. And we can't get into community centers. We can't get into, you know, NYCHA buildings, like, and it's just like, it's a nightmare. You know, it's an absolute nightmare. And so, like, that's hard, but that's, you know, that's the job. You know, that's what we signed up to do. So we're pushing through it. To be honest with you, I think that as nonprofits and sustainability folk, like, if we position it right, we have extraordinary leverage. And what we've been trying to do is really take that and leverage what we're doing. And, like, you know, we just can't think the way that we've been thinking about any of this. Like, we talk about a food bank, a soup kitchen, a community center, a restaurant, a farm. Like, we have to rethink the whole, not to plug the org, but, like, we have to rethink the whole thing. It like doesn't work. It like obviously doesn't work. It was like 1 week into this and we watched food banks get totally overrun. We watched restaurants shut down because they didn't have enough money to do, hit payroll. We had tons of our partners, we had to go and like do pop-ups in because a lot of the like individual agencies and community-based organizations closed. So that distributed food, like the system doesn't work and it broke. And that's what a lot of like, I think that when I think about, or when I see what's going around all over New York, I don't think that it's like, a part of it is because we've let the social safety net deteriorate so much and we have put so little into taking care of people. And what we have done has been so arrogant and like not the right thing. This is what we get and we deserve it. And I'm like, my other biggest frustration is like the city of New York needs to step up. They gotta step up. They gotta open up that pocketbook, file for bankruptcy, do whatever you want, call FEMA. Like the city's crumbled. Sorry, it's a lot.
Yeah, agreed.
I think this is actually a really good point. So the first question being the challenges you faced, and obviously we hear your frustrations. I'm sure they're shared in many other cities with this current crisis. You're right, the community is lacking, it's fraying at the edges, and that's why we're seeing these impacts. How would you, in your different fields, think that this pandemic can actually be a catalyst? How can it change? How will you change your business as usual, or how have you changed your platform's actions or call to action to deal and to see a future post the pandemic? I know in particular it depends on your industry, but are there any like quick actionable things that you've done or will do in order to make this pandemic be, incubator for a better, more sustainable future?
Well, again, I think this crisis we are in right now here, I think really brings people closer together. I, for example, also worked with the Save Our Compost Coalition, and there was really amazing organization outreach done, and really joining broad coalitions together to really advocate for a better, not only a better environment, but also for a better life for people. And I think I have really, I have seen this now come together, and that really gives me a lot of hope. I just feel there is a lot more interconnection and really analyzing why we are at this point and all the things that have to change. It's not just, it's not enough to just say, oh, we want sustainability. It's also, we need justice, we need environmental justice, we need climate justice. So I think these things are just really coming together, and this pandemic is really teaching us that we need to connect these dots and work together.
Many people have come to me, and I bet everybody hearing me right now has had some experience where they found that an unexpected connection, unexpected community happening that occurred because of their being not being able to do some of the things they did before. People consistently tell me, Josh, now that I'm shut in, actually I've become closer to my mom, I've become closer to my husband, my wife, my kids in some way, or that I've learned some value that I didn't before. And so I'm in my 5th year now of not flying. And I say to them, and I've given up the pretense of trying to hold back, saying, I told you so. But I say, I told you this 3-4 years ago, that if you actually tried to live by your environmental values, you would enjoy it. And now you're getting that experience. And everyone I've talked to has had something like that. And what I realized is that I can say that as much as I want. I can tell you, you're going to enjoy it when you try it, but we learn from experience. We don't learn from lecture. We don't learn from me telling you the answer. So the biggest thing is that this is an experience. Everyone has had an experience here that was unexpected. And that gives you a chance to go back and say, if that was unexpected, why did I think that was going to be unexpected? What belief did I think that this was going to be really bad? that I couldn't fly or that I had to whatever? And can I go back and what can I believe instead? What can I change to expect that the more that I live by my environmental values, the more that I will find, in my experience, joy, connection, community, more delicious food, saving money, and other people finding that too. And the more that one does it oneself, inevitably, you will lead others. I'm now invited to major organizations, global organizations, government bodies. How did this happen? Because I was actually doing it. The most important thing you can do is to act personally. And you find that when that happens. And everyone out there, I told you so. But really experience it and use this as a learning experience. You probably had something unexpected. And now that you can expect it now, expect it more. The more that you act on your environmental values, I predict the more that you'll find that you'll like your life more, that people will follow you more.
I'm gonna, I'm gonna let Nick go because he.
Thanks, Matt. No, Josh, I liked what you said there, and I think it's interesting. For me, running my whole world on the world of social media, particularly Instagram, saying "I told you so" is tough, right? Especially for people who are trying to get this first step in, and they're trying to feel good about themselves and their own plant journeys and their sustainability journeys. So it's a fine line. And I agree with you. Like, I want to say "I told you so" all the time. Cause like, look, I'm living this great life. Like, you could do it too. And it frustrates me sometimes when people don't jump on that. But it's interesting. I think for me, I'm seeing the bright side of this, because this is like the Super Bowl of plants and home gardening right now. Like, seed banks are just like completely flooded. They're running out. People are buying raised beds and trying to garden for the first time. And it's kind of like just, we're almost like we're putting it in reverse and going back to basics. And, my grandparents laugh and it's like, oh, like, we've been doing this for years. And then now all of a sudden it's popular and trendy. And, I think what this pandemic is teaching us is that slowness isn't a bad thing. And that's what I appreciate with my own plant journey so much, is because I was living this high-paced, super fast corporate lifestyle, and plants just slowed me down. Like, they give you that moment of patience, and you can't just put it in the ground and expect that tomato to just show up the next day. It's this trust in something greater. And I think this pandemic has made a lot of people, especially in New York, which is probably the most fast-paced city that I've been in, just to like take a breath, slow down a bit, and just like be present. And it's hard. It's really hard for people, and there's a lot of struggle and stress that comes with that. But it's making people rethink how they do things. And one way in particular, I see more and more people trying to get to the farmers market and do this and do that. And I think there's going to be a real opportunity to sort of decentralize our current food system. And what I mean by that is how can we better connect growers more directly with consumers, as opposed to relying on farmers markets and more big box grocery stores. And I've been doing some work with a company out in LA called Crop Swap, which is trying to literally be like the WAG or the Uber of produce. So you sign up for a box and you get your blueberries from this farm and you get your kale from this farm, and they'll have drop-off points at different areas of the city, so that these farms that are so reliant on some of these larger entities for success, if those crumble, then they don't have direct access to their consumers. So being able to figure out a way to decentralize some of that and just get people more connected to where their food is coming from is something I think is going to really make a big push after this is over.
Yeah, echoing Nick a little bit on that. I think it's, like for us at Rethink, and only in this situation, it's amazing, because the only business that a restaurant can do really well, like that actually brings in revenue, is for charity. So it's like we have chefs like totally dedicated towards making the most beautiful food, and we hold the contracts. So they have to be competitive about who can make the tastier meal, the better food, like who can do it. And like, it's amazing to see people compete over food quality for organizations that never got the light of day. That we, a big kind of Rethink to be totally transparent, Always and Forever is a food insecurity organization first and a sustainability organization second. Our focus is feeding people always and forever. And, you know, a big problem that we had with the way things were is that people have been essentially treating, you know, community-based organizations. Some people have an issue with the phrase soup kitchen, but like a lot of them basically are that in the back of churches, and treating them like they're dumpsters, you know, like the new dumpster. Like, oh, you'll take my hamburger buns, you'll take my potato scraps, you'll take my whatever I have left over. Like, who cares? It's not labeled. Of course you want it. And that is just awful, awful, awful attitude. And I've heard it again and again with people, especially private donors, like people who are like, why didn't Neighbors Together take my, you know, 80 hamburger buns? And I'm like, it's the same reason McDonald's won't buy your 80 hamburger buns. It's not part of their system. These organizations, they're restaurants, they're restaurants without checks. So you just gotta like, I think that we all are realizing the importance of the most important organization is not Rethink or City Harvest or Food Bank or, you know, Feeding America. It's Sister Carol at St. John's Bread and Life, because she's handing out the food. She's doing the work. And that's what's important. And that's who I'm kind of seeing getting the attention that they ultimately deserve.
I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, building off of what everyone has already said, is that public health is a really big deal. I feel like when I first started pursuing public health, people didn't really take it seriously. All the healthcare, all the frontline health workers, it's like doctors, nurses, but people didn't really see public health professionals as professionals. But there's a whole new appreciation for epidemiology and all the fields within public health. So I'm really happy that public health has had its time to shine, especially with controlling the outbreak. Another thing that is some good that came out of the pandemic is that sustainability efforts are something that's important, that should be prioritized. New York City has a One NYC 2050 strategic plan, which includes expanding our organics program, which has not expanded since 2018 and now is suspended indefinitely, as Christine has mentioned. If you look at stats on the budget that the mayor has proposed for the NYPD, there is more money going to police than there is for community programs like youth programs and composting and all of that. So if there's anything that I can implore people who are eligible to vote, is to register and to be active, not just at the federal level, but at local and state levels.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very, very interesting. I think maybe to push the conversation a little bit about what we as an individual and what our colleagues around the world can do. What we always hear is being green or taking environmental conscious decision isn't always cheap, right? Especially now during this hard economic times. What is one recommendation of one simple sustainable practice that anyone can do either at work or at home that without really breaking the bank that you would recommend? Who wants to start?
I can start this one. I love the idea of just planting by seeds. Seeds are the most inexpensive way to just get started, put something in the ground. It's $3 and you don't have to worry and have that plant fear and anxiety if you buy a fully grown plant and plant it if it doesn't make it, right?
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that I sort of have to take away from this is that like anyone can be a gardener. And that's how I started. I didn't have, a botany degree. I just started throwing seeds in the backyard and seeing what happens. And it's a really inexpensive way to do it. Actually, the New York Public Library has a seed catalog where you can actually go if you have a library card and get seeds. And it's a little known New York City fact, and hopefully when the library opens up again, you'll be able to access that. But
great.
It's such a great way, even if you have a windowsill or a fire escape. I know you're not supposed to, garden on your fire escape.
Yeah, you don't need a lot of space. Yeah. Exactly.
You don't need a lot of space to get started. Get a little soil and just start learning. And it's the easiest way to just sort of enter into growing your own food. And, you know, if you're looking for other sustainable tips, like I am obsessed with, you know, thrift shopping. I haven't bought new clothes in like 2 years at this point. And then just keep supporting your farmers markets and asking them questions about if they have seeds and if they have seedlings, because oftentimes they do, and you can get them really cheap. So always be asking questions.
No, that's great, Nick. And I'll definitely reach out to you to get some help with my plants. But I agree. As you said, I think planting is so therapeutical for me. You know, after really a rushed, stress day in New York, I come home and I have a couple of little plants and I just look at them, take care of them, you know, see how the birds are coming. And you just, it's just that, that connection to nature that I think we're all probably missing in the city. And, you know, small little window shield or space in your home to grow some plants, I think is a great way. Thanks for that.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna name a couple of things because Nick also did.
Please go ahead. Yeah, it's only not only one. Please go ahead. I think
okay.
I'll take notes.
Sounds good. I would say that some of the most easiest things that you can start with is bringing your own bag and bringing your own reusable bottle wherever you go. It's super easy. You put it by your door before you head out, or you could just put it in the bag that you usually go out with. That's one way that you can reduce your waste on single-use plastic bags or single-use plastic water bottles. But another thing that I really wanted to share that might not be as obvious is bringing your own meals to work. Like, I don't know why it's so trendy to get takeout from restaurants. I get that it's a convenience factor and some people are really busy, but we can always meal prep on the weekends, and it reduces so much waste from takeout containers. And if that really is a barrier of meal prepping on the weekends because you really have no time, you can invest in a reusable container and call ahead of time to this restaurant and see if you can pack that, that meal when you go pick up your food. I've seen in my office that more than half of my coworkers are the ones throwing out their the containers. The waste in our trash bins are always filled with takeout containers. So that's something that I would definitely push with UNICEF, with everyone on the panel, which I'm sure that you all are already doing. But yeah.
Actually, on that point, with the greening team at UNICEF, before this whole pandemic started, we were doing great work with a few restaurants around UNICEF House and our offices in New York that allowed us to bring our own containers. For some, there's like a little bit of hesitance because of the food laws and making sure they abide by health code, but there's actually nothing in the health code that says they can't take a container. And if you, again, just ask questions and push a little bit, sometimes they'll give. And as an organization with the greening team, we're hoping to make that change. Believe me, there's plenty of posters all through UNICEF House encouraging, as our fellow colleagues know who are listening right now, to use less, bring your own. We even had our executive director share like a couple of things that she brings with her water bottle, her mug, stuff like that.
That's great.
So yeah, definitely actions that we're looking forward to continuing once we're back.
There's also, in case anyone didn't know, there's actually legislation to push for allowing restaurants to accept reusable containers when you do takeout. So look out for that.
Oh, that's great. And I think especially now, you know, that we all had to really cook more at home. I mean, I feel, I'm talking from personal experience, you know, I never really had time to cook, always very busy. And now I really learned, I really enjoy it. And I think, you know, I take more time to look at what I'm buying, where I'm buying it. But I think, as you mentioned, Belinda, you know, taking, you know, making your own food and bringing it, not only we're going to reduce the waste, but also we, you know, it's a fun activity on the weekend if you do it with your family, and it just connects you more with the food, and you realize, you know, how hard it is to you know, and how expensive it is to get the good food and to use all of it and not just go quickly buy something, rush through it, eat it, and throw out all this trash. So yeah, it's great.
All right, I'm going to pipe in at that one.
Yes.
Number one is drop this idea. If your idea of going green is shopping at Whole Foods and buying the things that people are going to sell to you that are expensive, go do that, fine. But that is not effective and is not the case. Drop this belief that acting sustainably costs more.
Money. Yeah.
Yes, you can spend more if you want. Go for it. That's your business, but it is absolutely not necessary. People come to my place. I do my famous no packaging vegetable stews. And over again, people say to me, oh, you can do this because you're privileged and you have all this access and things like that. They say, you don't know what it's like to be a single mom in a food desert with 3 kids and 3 jobs. Okay, I'm not a single mom in a food desert. They don't know where in my background, okay, but they aren't a single mom from a food desert either. So one day I'm at a potluck lunch at my CSA, and next to me is a single mom who lives in the Bronx. And I say, we're talking, being friends and stuff like that. And I say, why don't you come over for my famous no packaging vegetable stew, and I'll record a podcast episode with you. And you can hear this on the podcast. She's like, this is what we've been looking for. This is totally accessible to us. We just don't know how to do it. And the last thing my last public appearance before COVID hit was she invited me up to the Bronx, and I went up to a community center there, and I showed them how I do my famous no packaging vegetable stews. By the way, I've thrown out my garbage once in 2019, once in 2018, once in 2017. I'm eating cheaper, more convenient than ever. Everything I do is totally accessible for people anywhere in Manhattan, anywhere in New York City. It might not be able to get quite the zero packaging that I get, or not quite zero, but very low. And so I go up there, and the first person she says, we couldn't really do this up here. But then one by one, they start saying, actually, I could do this part. Oh, I could do that part. And it starts coming together. And they say, this is our way out of all of the McDonald's and Starbucks and stuff like that. It is not more expensive to buy food in season. You go to the farmer's market or wherever you can when the stuff is in season, and you come home with like kale like this big, and it's like, befriend the farmers, and they'll give you the extra stuff, the stuff they were going to take back to the farm to compost. It tastes just as good, just as healthy. It is not more expensive to not fly. Not flying is cheaper than flying. It is cheaper not to have a TV and not to have Netflix and all that stuff than to have those things. It is cheaper, more convenient. You'll spend more time with family, more time with your community. This idea that it's more expensive, somewhere out there, there's some marketer that's like, oh, they like to buy this stuff. Let's charge more for it. And they're winning. Buy in season. Don't buy stuff that you don't need. Not buying clothes and using stuff longer is cheaper than buying clothes. Fixing stuff is cheaper than not fixing stuff. It is the opposite of, I'm great for the marketers. I'm glad they're making their money. And if people are choosing to spend money on stuff that they don't need to, that's their business. But number one, drop the belief that it costs more to live sustainably.
That's so great. Thank you so much, Josh, for making that point, because I think I always also try to explain that to people, and it's just, you always hear it again and again. It's like, no, I don't have the money, I don't have that, but I think that's so true. Yeah. Thanks so much for making that point.
And I just want to, it's okay. I do really, I understand that. And I think that, yes, ultimately it is cheaper. I am going to push a little bit on that. Part of the reason I launched Rethink was, I was teaching classes on, in certain neighborhoods about how to make healthy food. I was using my skill set as a chef to just be really blunt about like, this is how you do it. Cooking's not that hard. Cooking's fun, and like try to like almost gamify it to get people excited. But it's not about money. It's about time. And making stew takes time, cutting vegetables and having all that stuff. It's time wealth. And that's a very different conversation. And that's the conversation that I'm in a lot. So the soup kitchen and the food bank and McDonald's is winning, not because of money. They're winning because of time. So I think that that's really what we have to get around. Like, I think that people, like, I work every day. Most of my team works 6 days a week, but I run we have 58 employees, and we're really grinding along. And we just don't have the ability to say, all right, you guys go home at 4, hit the farmer's market, take your stuff home, cut your veg, do your thing. We just don't, I can't do that. My employees leave at 10 o'clock at night. They're ordering pizza. It's just how it is. And I think that that's a bigger issue and a bigger can of worms, but I never want to leave time wealth off the table, because it's something that's not discussed enough.
Well, I invite everybody here when we can to come over for my famous no packaging vegetable stew, and to see I can cook in less prep time a meal for all of us, and less time shopping and everything than it would take to get takeout. It did take time to get to where I could do that.
Yeah.
But I believe it's possible. Anyway, we can all make steps in that direction.
Yeah, and just all work a little bit less.
Definitely. I think both are valid points, and I think both have, you know, they frame the discussion in very different ways. And I think it's important to consider all those. I see Christine, you unmuted. So if you want to come in, please.
Yeah, sure. I think what we maybe also part of it is really to think a little bit more about how to empower ourselves to be more self-sufficient. Because a lot of these things is like you either sort of depend on these external convenient things to grab a quick bite to eat because maybe it's perceived that you don't have the time or it's just convenient. And to just think a little bit harder about how to, you know, take a step back and to really, because I think some people also get to this point where they say, oh, I don't know how to cook, that's why I go out to eat, or that's why I get a lot of takeout. And, you know, to learn to be more self-sufficient and to trust that, I think is also part of that.
Absolutely. Thank you all for everything we've discussed so far. I'm going to open it to the Q&A. We have a couple questions, so I just want to read one from the Q&A. As UNICEF staff, we work in many different contexts around the world, not always finding support or the ideal conditions for environmental action. What would be your advice when you try to take action but encounter this tall, almost impenetrable wall? How to stay motivated? I think this goes back to no small actions, but meaningful actions, perhaps, Joshua, but.
Yeah, I think that there are no ideal conditions. The system, we've all been born into a world with systems that make it much, it's the standard operating procedures is very polluting and things like that. The challenges are not, I think a lot of people think the challenges are, I just need to know more information. I just need to understand exactly how carbon dioxide does this or how methane does that. In my experience, the challenges are our beliefs. They're the social and emotional challenges of, I've been at this for 6 months and I'm getting nowhere. I'm just going to give up. I felt that. I can't tell the number of times I wanted to give up. And it's feeling like when someone says, oh, what you're doing, it doesn't matter. To have the social and emotional skills of saying, what I do does matter. No one wants to believe that what they do doesn't matter. No parent would tell their child what you do doesn't matter. And these are the challenges. It's more like the challenges of if you want to quit smoking or if you want to quit some habit or start some habit. These social and emotional things, I think these are the biggest challenges in ourselves internally and in our interface with others. Giving people more information or learning more information, that has a certain value, but being able to stick with what you're going to do and develop discipline, and in my case, discipline and drive and determination, and finding, where do I find that reward from? Because it's not going to be, I fixed all the world's problems overnight. I can guarantee that. But it's going to be, this person changed, that person changed, this organization contacted me that I never expected would. Things like that. Those are the things to work on that are the biggest challenges of personal change and systemic change.
I would say that depending on your office, some offices may not be as progressive in terms of green initiatives, and you might face a lot of setbacks. I've been working at my organization for almost 2.5 years now, and I've been fighting for commercial composting for the longest time. I've been facing setbacks after setbacks because of the perception that we'll be inviting pests, we'll be inviting insects and rats and all of that stuff. And while it is discouraging, I am taking what I can do. I've hosted recycling workshops at my office. I am taking questions on a case-by-case basis whenever people have questions on, does this go in the blue bin? Does this go in the green bin? If this is a compostable material and we don't have a compost bin, where does it go? I've organized recycling drives, organized donation drives. Do these little actions that can potentially make a difference. Do what you can, because no action is too small and every action is meaningful.
So true. Anyone else wants to jump on that question? Otherwise, we have some others for you.
Maybe I'll just tag along to the end of that and say, I completely agree. I mean, I think it's a shift in mindset. I think it's every action counts. And I think if you encounter this wall, it sounds perhaps too idealistic, but keep going. I mean, eventually you will find somebody who it resonates with. at UNICEF, just for staff who's listening, on the second floor in EMOPS, I got a bin and I put it in the freezer and I told everybody I knew, put your food scraps here. I'll take it to the farmer's market. They were nice enough, because it's not corporate, though it should be for composting, to accept my food scraps every Wednesday. So I think it's small actions, pushing, being maybe a little annoying. Do my EMOPS colleagues, emergency programs colleagues, like all my greening emails with the amount of emails that they have already? Perhaps they're not ideal, but I've gotten a couple of people to come with me to the composting. We were looking into donating a couple of electronics to the Lower East Side Ecology e-waste program, and different things where I'm plugged in. So maybe I can just disseminate that information and perhaps it'll lead to further action. But that was a great question, specific to UNICEF staff.
And we have another one here from Nikki. What feasible recommendations do you guys have for UN agencies in New York to be more sustainable and reduce our environmental footprint in a post-COVID-19 world? What can be realistic implement beyond, I guess, small personal steps has been asked, and what steps can management take to make a real difference at the office? We have issues with composting in the office and recycling in the office, but what are some of the steps that you would recommend that we could bring to our management to make a real difference in the office?
I think I could jump in on that one. Like, we do a lot of this office stuff, and we pick up food every Wednesday. We used to, like, Wednesday and Friday from the UN headquarters. It's one, I think it's kind of interesting that, like, almost nobody knows that, like, at the UN. Like, every time I talk to somebody at UN attach something, and I'm like, yeah, like, we take all your food waste and we bring it to our commissary kitchen and we cater a bunch of soup kitchens with it. And they're like, what? Like, that's why aren't they telling it? Like, they should message it. You should ask them to message the things that they're doing, the things that have been successful. We have really great metrics behind it. We fed thousands and thousands of people with just the food that we've been picking up. It works. It's good. And then you should encourage them to take that next step. Sorry, I'm in like a warehouse, a little loud. But yeah, you should really push your employer. Like, I think that your employer, like, as an employer, like, your employer really cares about retaining their employees and keeping them there and keeping them happy. It's a big part of what they do. And if you're upset about it, you should go to HR. You should have a conversation with your HR rep. They're the person that information is feeding into their CSR programs, their recruitment programs, like, at least for the investment banks. Go to HR, say, I'm really disappointed. I can't work here. All this food waste, I can't deal with this anymore. It's against my beliefs. And, like, they'll do it, because the other option is that you do that 3 times and they do anything and you get a lawyer, and then that's a whole other situation. So I would use your employee rights. You have a lot of rights as an employee, and you have a really big voice. So I would really push on that.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Matt. I think that's great. And, we also in the Green Team, we're always welcome to hear recommendations that our colleagues have. So please, feel free to reach out to one of us in the Green Team, and we're always welcoming new ideas of new things that we can do, and we push management really hard. I mean, when I joined UNICEF a couple of years ago, you started banning plastic bottles. We realized every meeting there were 20, 30 plastic bottles, individual plastic bottles that we were giving out to staff and to other guests for conferences, and that was just mind-blowing to me why you would do that. And people would take a sip and leave it, put it in the trash. So we've banned that now. We've talked to management. I think, and I think, as you said, Matt, it's really just voicing your concern and just asking, because management, I think, is open. A lot of times they are not aware of that. They were like, what? We're giving plastic bottles out? Why are we doing this? Why are we not having people come with their own mugs or glasses, or fill up the water in the pantries, or bring have a water mug there for people to fill in the water. So I think once you raise the concerns with management, I think they're most of the time really open to make the changes. We just need to do that and be proactive. Yeah,
I want to point to the role of management, the role of leadership here. I see I haven't been there. I can't see the situation. In most cases that I've seen, leaders of companies themselves are not acting personally, and people look to them as role models. Yeah. I'm going to give two examples. There's a major corporation, some of you may know the name of it, and I was working with the global chief communications officer, and they were trying to do some sustainability programs, and the people weren't buying into it. Part of the reason across the hall was the global CEO, and the global CEO said, you know, I fly so much, I can't really talk about acting sustainably. Let's form a committee to do it, and I'll kind of stay out of it. And I think he was leading, but the opposite of what he expected. I think everyone was learning, well, tell other people to do stuff, but without me doing it myself. And I want to contrast this with, I visited Patagonia, the clothing company, and took the train out to California. And everyone there that I spoke to, if you haven't read Let My People Go Surfing, about Yvon Chouinard, the founder, his book about how he bet the farm multiple times to live by his values. By bet the farm, I mean, he chose to act sustainably by his values, even when he didn't know if it would work out. And every single person there knew that, and every single person there loved that, and they themselves did it. And so when someone said, there's a problem over here, we could be less wasteful, but I don't know what to do about it. Someone else said, oh, I know what to do about it, but I don't really know how to implement it. And someone else would say, I know how to implement it. I contrast that with in New York. Has everyone here been in a 50-degree room when it's 100 degrees out in the summer? And they say, well, there's this room up there that if we don't cool it down this much here, then they complain. And so they got space heaters on in the middle of the summer. And we give up because we think, well, what can we do? And this to me is a leadership issue. I don't know how to solve that one. I haven't really solved it, but it happens. But Patagonia has. And when the leaders behave in a way that they don't just say what to do, it's not even saying what to do. They generally have to be vulnerable and say, I don't know all the answers. If we knew the answers, we'd do them. No one knows the answers, all of them. But I'm going to try my best. I'm going to try something. And I'm not going to ask you to do something that I myself am not doing. And if you're not hearing that very strongly from your leaders, I'm also in this with you. And you maybe are, I'm not sure, I haven't been there, but most places they aren't. In the company that I was talking about, actually a lot of the initiatives that they tried to do, the employees perceived it as them being cheap, as opposed to being sustainable or acting by their values. They were trying to act by their values, but because they didn't share their flaws, their weaknesses, their ignorance, they propelled that you have to be perfect to do anything.
Yeah.
We hope that's not keeping any of our colleagues away from the green team. We're not perfect. We don't know the foolproof solution to being the most environmental. We welcome you and your opinions and your exposure to different areas, whether you're in the New York office or in any of our country offices or regional offices, and you're doing sustainability work. Please join us and let us learn from you. And we hope it's not making it inaccessible for anybody. Our green team's open to suggestions and absolutely open to more and different perspectives.
Karina, you want to take there's one more, another question here that came in. Do you want to take that one? You're on mute.
Yeah, you'd think after so many months of Zoom, I would have, gotten that down. This one is from staff asking how to fill the gap between motivation and action. So we've been talking about meaningful actions and daily things we can do. How do we bridge the gap when we forget or when we just don't have it in our day-to-day routine? What are some tips or any resources that you can offer as panelists or that you use yourselves in order to make that a routine within us? So a sustainability routine, and that bridging the motivation and action gap.
I love this question. I get this question a lot. It's kind of how I started my own sustainability journey as well. And for me, it was about documenting everything. And that wasn't just meaning like writing it down. It meant like, hey, I'm going to put out, an Instagram story saying I'm going to do this. And then once it's out there, people are like, hey, did you do that? Like, did you follow through with it? and I used my audience to hold me accountable for certain things. And it doesn't have to be an audience of, 50,000 people. It can be your neighbor. It can be a couple people at work just to check in with. And, I think this speaks a lot to Josh's point about community, because once you find that community of shared values, and then people who are going to be like, hey, like, have you thought about this? Or, now that you completed this step, why not take the next one? I think that it is so important to your own success. And will also, if you're at all, have a little competitive streak to you, like, you're going to want to be competitive about it. And you can make it fun at work or with your family or whatever it is. But documenting everything is something that I found has been really effective.
I love that, Nick. And I was going to add on, like, accountability is so key. I moved back home during the pandemic, and I'm living with my sister right now. And whenever we go shopping, she's kind of like my accountability buddy. If I forget to bring a bag, she already has a bag of reusable bags, so she'll just give me a bunch. So that's a way to hold each other accountable. Like, if we are going to work out, people usually have workout buddies. So this can be something that you can adopt if you want to do a sustainability journey of your own. And also, like, I have an Instagram platform as well. I don't have as many followers, but I like being held accountable. If I'm going to share something, I'll also document if I've made a mistake. That way I can practice humility and show that I'm not perfect either, and it's okay to make mistakes. And that's, like, part of the journey of how to live more sustainably.
Yeah, I really like that. That's really amazing. That's like one of our core values out of this. We did a lot of thinking about, like, who we are during this process, because, like, shit got weird. Sorry for swearing, but being vulnerable is, like, really important. Like, it's like we say we, like, stub our toe all the time. Like, we screw up. Like, it's okay. It's in my letters. Like, I'm literally in the middle of, like, if I'm a little distracted, in a giant screw up right now. I'm, like, living it. So, but we stay positive. You stay optimistic. And then back to documenting. Like, it always fascinated me that people write down what they need, but they don't write down what they didn't need. Like, when you're cleaning your fridge or whatever, like, just making a list of what you threw out. And it's, like, a really powerful thing. It's like the anti-grocery list. It's, like, it works. Like, it really works. That's, like, the fastest way to do that. Like, to see what you have. So the next time you go to the store, it's like, well, I obviously don't need, I can get the small case of eggs. I can get this, figure it out.
For me, it helps to, if I go to the store and this is actually the beginning of the beginning of the no packaging. The store has the peanut butter machine where I can hit the lever and it grinds peanuts into the container. So I love peanut butter. If I go to the store, this is years ago, if I went to the store and I forgot my container, no peanut butter for me that week. I got to wait until I bring it. If I go to the store and I forgot to bring my bag, it's what I can carry in my hands to go home. And I quickly learn, I'm hungry. Next time I'm not gonna forget. And I think also to focus on a lot of times we start a habit and we say, you know what, I'm not gonna get new bags. I'm gonna bring a bag with me. The challenge is not how you feel in the moment that you feel very determined at that moment. You feel capable of anything. It's the moment when you're really stressed and a million things are going on. At that moment, that's the time that's the challenge, to remember the bag if you're not in the habit of it. And think of those moments. What can you make when you're most discouraged, when you're most frustrated, when you're most distracted? That's the moment to prepare for. And it could be with, at the moment when we drop a habit, at the moment when we don't do what we meant to, we generally think, oh, I deserve a break right now, or, oh, anyone else would too. We have lots of excuses in those moments, and it feels right not to do what, and then later we might say, oh, I told myself I wasn't gonna let that happen. Focusing on that moment, those moments when we're most discouraged, most frustrated, those are the ones to prepare for in whatever way works for you.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Josh, because I as you said, like, you're not gonna take your peanut butter if you didn't bring your jar. I have that sometimes too. I always bring my coffee mug around, and sometimes I just forget it. And then I'm, in the beginning I was like, oh, now I have to buy the coffee, and I, use the single-use cup. And I've told myself, yeah, I'm not gonna get my coffee today. And you know what? I've saved some money. It's probably healthier for me not to drink so much coffee during the day. And I think if you're just not down at yourself, or just say like, okay, I'm just gonna do it anyway. And I think with time you realize you really don't need all the things that you actually always want to try to get or buy.
Oh yeah, can I add another thing? The number of people, tell me, panelists, have you been asked about toothbrushes, and shampoo and toilet paper over and over again. And so people who don't act because they don't know how to get a toothbrush get takeout, and the amount of plastic in the takeout is so much greater than in that toothbrush. And they say, I can't solve this hard thing and I'll get to that later, and they don't act. And so there's plenty of places to act. I mean, all of us can find something, and don't not act because one of the hard things you can't figure out. There's probably the lower hanging fruit around.
And quickly on that, Josh, can I ask you, you know, I've heard and heard you also mentioning this today on the panel, that you produce very little garbage. That just always amazes me. I mean, I want to be better at, like, you know, reducing my garbage. How do you do that? Like, for example, when you just mentioned now, you go to the supermarket, you bring all of the jars and packages with you. How do you do that?
Here's this year's garbage so far. It's, I mean, I use bags until the end. So this is what I got for so far. I mean, I was at the store, and I'm out here at my mom's house, and normally I would get them bulk. Keep all your trash. I make the mistake of talking about how it takes me a year to fill up a load of garbage. It didn't start. It used to be once a week. After some time, it was once every 2 weeks. After some time, it was once every month. I mean, some things, Lauren Singer, who's not here, she's been a huge role model for me. And B. Johnson, another person whose family of 4, including 2 children, produces a year's worth of garbage, fits in a jar that size. And the more that I change, the more that I find role models well beyond where I am, and the joy in it. But the beginning for me, after years ago going with avoiding meat, and then avoiding hydrogenated oil, and then avoiding packaged food. Avoiding packaged food was a big one. I gave myself a challenge. Could I go for 1 week without buying any packaged food? I'll let myself finish what's in the cupboard, but just not buying anything. And I made it 2.5 weeks. It was the first time I ever bought dried beans, soaked them, put them on the stove, and cooked them overnight. Cooked them on the stove. And that, forcing myself to do it, got me to develop the skills. And so then, you know, later you get into things like, I was getting a lot of vinegar. And so I learned how to just chop up some apples and make some vinegar. And all these little steps that you can't get to them. You got to do the first things. And then later you find out the next things, and the next things, and the next things. It's, my big model is the movie The Martian. I don't know if people saw it, but Matt Damon plays this character who's on Mars, and there's an explosion, and he's like about to die. And he's got to fix his suit so he can get some oxygen. Okay, he fixes the suit, and then he's got to fix the tent where he lives, and that'll keep him going for another day. And then he's got to get some food, that'll keep him going for a couple months. And if you said to him when he was fixing his suit, why bother fixing your suit? It's not going to get back to Earth. Why even start? He wouldn't have started. And, you know, it's a fictional story, obviously, but you do the first step, and that will lead you to the next step. And you probably couldn't solve the second or third or fourth steps without doing the first one. But you figure one thing out, it takes you to the next thing. You figure that thing out, it takes you to the next thing. Along the way, you develop a skill, you develop experience, you find new role models. And next thing you know, people are saying to you, how'd you do that? And you're like, and then you realize you picked it up along the way. Don't think you're going to get back to Earth just from like the smallest thing that you do. You're not going to save the planet. But if you find the joy in it, and if you're listening to this, if you're here, you will. And then you take each step as it comes.
I think I think that's really smart. I think the goals are really important. And this is like, I saw this, you know, this was when people were not taking COVID seriously, but I remember always seeing the thing that was like, sustainability should get COVID's PR agent. And that was like way before. And I think like we have to find a better way to say it. Like, it's not that bad. Like, it's not that hard. Like, you know, like it's, you know, you use reusable cups. So that's like a big step, you know, you make your own food. That's a big step. You find this joy in cooking, you know, and community. And like, it's just, I guess my point is like when I'm teaching restaurants, why I've started teaching restaurants about hunger relief is because when I call it hunger relief, they're like 10 times more likely to do it. You know, it's not about, and then I tell them, oh, by the way, you've diverted X amount of thousands of pounds from landfills. But I think that there just needs to be some like really thoughtful rebrand on the thing, because I think to Joshua's point, is that the corporation said, you're not sustainable unless you buy this. And it drove people to see this as expensive and look for shortcuts and spending. And really, if we could just like find a way to like make it fun, or as fun as like a fidget spinner or something like that, like we could do, I think, a lot more.
I love that, Matt. I think, you know, I joke around a lot too, saying that, you know, in order to make these changes, you kind of need to see it to believe it. And if we wanted to solve climate change tomorrow, why not just dump all the plastic in the Hamptons and then see what happens? Like, I think people, if they're not seeing the waste in front of them, it's very easy to pretend like it doesn't exist. And, you know, it definitely does need to be more fun. Like, I host these plant potlucks once a month where I bring together a bunch of people from sustainability and fashion and plants and agriculture and food. You're all invited to the next one, which at this rate will be 2022. But it's fun. Like, we don't talk about it. Everyone brings their own dish. There is zero waste involved. We don't openly say like, oh, this is a zero waste event, but it's fun and it's social and it's casual. And then people start making connections saying, oh, I just talked to that woman over there who is in sustainable fashion. Maybe I should start thrifting more. And oh, I just talked to this person over here who's growing their own food. Maybe I can do that. So it almost has to be kind of inception, right? You don't hit them over the head with it. It's not super intense, but it gets people comfortable with the idea. And once they're comfortable, they start taking those risks in a way.
I think this answers our next question perfectly. This concept of rebranding, making it fun. We're getting asked, it's frustrating when I do the right thing, bring my own container, recycle properly, etc. But I see so many people around me not caring. How do I invite these people to increase their environmental responsibility? So, as was just exposed by most of you, making it fun, rebranding it, making it not as daunting perhaps, but any other tips?
I would also add to lead by example and try not to shame. As tempting as it might be, it almost never works, and it could end up going the opposite direction of what you're intending. I found that when I'm leading by example at work or with my friends using my platform, I've had people contact me through direct message or pull me aside at work just to ask me like, hey, what do the numbers 1 to 7 mean on the plastic containers? Or where do I properly dispose of my nail polish and things like that? So not shaming people and being very welcoming when people are asking these kinds of questions is a way to sort of like reel them into the sustainability world and in a very inviting way.
Yeah, so true, Belinda. I really echo that, because I think, you know, and a lot of times what I've realized is that through our work with the Green Team is it's just a lot of just education, as you say. You know, people might not have the time to research one thing, and they don't know about the, you know, the different plastic types and where to put the trash and the recycling. But I think if we just share our knowledge and talk more about it, and just I think people are usually more welcome to take on that information and then making the changes. I don't think a lot of people do it in a mean way, or, you know, just they're just rushing through life and maybe doing other things and not paying too much attention about small things like recycling or, you know, taking your reusable cup or bag with you. So I do echo that.
Yeah, I think echoing that as well. I think it's like, I don't know is a perfectly reasonable answer. Like I don't know everything. I'm far, you know, like exactly. I said, it's a hunger organ. Like, you know, we just don't know some things. And so you say it like, can you help me figure it out? Or like, do you mind, like, if you find out, can you let me know? Or, you know, whatever. It's just like, you know, like it takes a village kind of deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be careful saying that because of what you observe of their behavior that they don't care. If you tell someone, or even think and behave consistently with that thought, that someone doesn't care, you're gonna, and very likely they do care about the air that they breathe, the water that they drink, the food that they eat, the land that they live on, their communities. If you communicate and they sense that you think that they don't care, but they in their hearts do care, you've lost your credibility with them. It's very difficult to influence someone when they believe that you don't understand them. I'm out here, and the number of Trump 2020 signs and MAGA, and as it turns out, it's now that's KAG. I didn't know it's Keep America Great. Turns out that, you know, and if I want to communicate with them, if I want to influence the people who are not already on board, if I start by saying, look, you don't care, I'm going to get you to care, I'm nowhere with them. I have to, influencing others, you have to go where they are, not where you want them to be, not where you think they should be, not where they could be, not where you want them to be, but where they are. And that takes a lot of empathy. It's very difficult. It's very uncomfortable. I don't like to put my mind my heart and mind in the mindset and the heart set of someone who litters and pollutes without thinking of the things that I think of. But that's where I have to go if I want to influence them. And on another more Machiavellian perspective, I believe that in today's world, the demand for leadership in the area of sustainability of the environment is huge. I mean, I'm seeing the rise of CSOs, chief sustainability officers. And so from a Machiavellian perspective, if you act and they don't, one day they're going to be working for you. You're going to get promoted. You're going to get positions. And if it's companies need and want people with experience in these areas, and if you have that experience and that experience gives you skills and connections that they don't, all right, you're going to get the job and they're not. And you're going to be able to influence people on a much broader scale. And if it's important to you, you'll probably get paid more and get more prestige and things like that as well, because you're doing what they could do, but they're not. And what's in great demand in our world today.
I'll mute. I had a question for Matt, actually. I'm sure maybe our colleagues would love to hear a little bit more about how they can maybe volunteer with your organization. Like my husband and I actually went once to one of your soup kitchens, and we peeled, I think, I don't know how many hundreds of eggs on a weekend and made a wonderful salad. And we learned how, with one of your wonderful chefs, Felix, how to make a wonderful salad. And so it was such a fun activity, not only, to do something fun and learn how to cook, but also, meet new people and do good. So maybe you want to just tell us a little bit about maybe if staff is interested in New York, how they can maybe volunteer.
Well, it's a difficult time to volunteer, but
I know.
And I really appreciate that. I'm glad I was unaware of that. But yeah, Felix is a great person. But when this kind of comes out, like we are going to go for volunteers, and just go to rethinkfood.nyc, reach out. And even if you just want to, we're very collaborative. We really like to hear people's opinions and chat with people, and we have a goal. As we talk about, we have a goal. We don't really have a way there. So we want to hear. We want to hear from everybody. So just rethinkfood.nyc, reach out. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
So we're nearing the end of our panel. We want to give one more shout out for Q&A. So staff, if you're on, I hope you've enjoyed the panel so far, but last call for your questions for the panelists. And for our panelists, like Karina's last question to Matt, Nick, I have one for your specific brand. What was your first plant as a plant parent? I know you mentioned plant parenting is like the gateway to sustainability, and your plant coaching platform is super popular in New York. I know right now I'm surrounded by so many plants, so it's definitely not just a niche market.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The original plants were all the backyard gardening plants. So my tomatoes, my zucchinis, my cucumbers. But here in the city, my first plant was a Strelitzia nicolai, a bird of paradise. I got it for $75 at Home Depot. It was 5 feet tall. I had literally no idea what I was doing. I was like, hey, this looks great. I'm going to figure it out. Had south-facing windows, knew that was pretty good. And that's a plant that is still with me. It's at my parents' place actually now. It's 11 feet tall. It hit the ceiling and started bending over. So that's a little problematic, but it's a great plant that is drought tolerant. It can handle lower periods of light. So in terms of sustainability and not having to buy a new one when you kill a plant, it's a great starter plant that still gives you that lush jungle feel inside your home.
That's great. And actually on that, Nick, I also would love to hear more, maybe just quickly, how can people get involved? You mentioned this new city farm that you worked on. Can people get involved in that if they want to?
Absolutely. So the Essential Farmers Project, just essentialfarmers.com. There's a link on there where you can go in and put in your information, but we have over 250 people signed up from around the country doing different farm work in different areas where they are situated. And we are currently on the farm in Staten Island and also evaluating a few new opportunities in urban farms here in Manhattan as well as Brooklyn. So if you have any questions, feel free to just shoot me a DM or log in right there on the site.
Awesome. And one last for Josh. Josh, you have to send us your address so we can come and taste your stew and learn how to do that.
I am very serious that people have come over
We'll come.
and said,
We're
I
very
heard
serious.
you said it, and I was like, come on over. We have to be a little more careful during the pandemic. But yeah, I really am serious. And we actually, Eric Adams, I invited him, Brooklyn Borough President, and we're figuring out how to online do a vegetable stew together so that the whole world can see it. But please come over. And in the meantime, I recommend listening to my podcast, Leadership in the Environment. And my third TEDx talk, or all of them, but the third one especially, if you go to joshuaspodek.com, and well, I'm changing the site, so it's a little hard to find. Anyway, look up Joshua Spodek TEDx, and the TEDx Connecticut College one is a great one to start with.
Great.
Awesome. And then Belinda, just to close up our panel, we've lost a couple of our panelists because of time constraints, and we know Matt was dealing with a mini crisis with Rethink Food. But with your platform, the blog, and also your Instagram platform, I've seen that you do a lot of illustrations. Do you think that's, what do you think that adds to your platform, or is it a stress relief? And where can we find your platforms besides the blog?
So I use bullet journaling kind of as a creative outlet. So I've seen people do permaculture illustration. I'm using bullet journaling as another way of communicating whatever messaging I'm trying to communicate for the given week. You can find me at ahealthyblueprint.com or on Instagram at ahealthyblueprint. But I also want to plug in the Save Our Compost initiative at Save Our Compost, just because it's super important for New Yorkers. Everyone on the panel is very desperate to have community composting reinstated in our city. So I would urge everyone to follow that and my platform for any updates.
Awesome. Thank you so much to our remaining panelists. If you have anything else you would like to add for our staff who are still online, we currently don't have any more Q&As, but I'm sure the questions will roll in from colleagues who will see the video later on our platform. So we'll be sure to include all your information and reach out to you if there's questions that we don't know the answer to. Anything else on your end?
It was great being here and speaking with all of these panelists. It was great meeting all of you.
Yeah, same here. You
pleasure.
guys put together an amazing group of people. It was so refreshing not to have like, but what about this, but what about that? And people who are doing things personally and seeing the results happen. I'm sure you guys persevered through a lot. And I love seeing this of people acting themselves. It's so inspirational.
Yeah, and on that note, thank you so much really for your time, for tuning in, for joining us and sharing your work and passion. We hope we have instilled some passion in other colleagues and gave them some good tips. And we really enjoyed the discussion, and we hope to all meet you very soon and not over Zoom.
Hopefully.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thanks
so
everybody
much
for joining. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.